This play is called Our Town. It was written by Thornton Wilder, Grover's Corners, New Hampshire. The day is May 7th, 1901. The time is just before dawn. Some streaks of light are just beginning to show over in the east there, just beyond our mountain. The morning star always gets wonderful bright the minute before it has to go, doesn't it? Well, I'd better show you how our town lies. Up here is Main Street. Way back here is the railway station. Tracks go that way. Polish towns across the tracks and some Canucks families. Congregational church is across the streets. Presbyterian, Methodist, and Unitarian are over there. Baptist is down in the hollow by the river. Catholic church is over beyond the tracks. There's our post office and town hall combined. Jail is in the basement. Along here are a row of stores, hitching posts and horse blocks in front of them. The first automobile is going to come along in about 5 years. Belonged to Banker Cartwright, our richest citizen, lived in the big white house up on the hill. That's our grocery store, and that's Mrs. Morgan's drugstore. Everybody seems to go into those two stores at least once a day. Public schools over yonder, high school still farther over. 9:15 mornings, noon times, and 3 o'clock afternoons, the whole town can hear the yelling and screaming from those schoolyards. This here is our doctor's house, Doc Gibbs, and this is the back door. There's some scenery for those who think they need to have scenery. And this is Mrs. Gibbs' garden. Corn, peas, beans, hollyhock, heliotrope, and a lot of burdock. In those days, our newspaper would come out twice a week, the Grover's Corner Sentinel. And this is our editor's house, Editor Webb. And this is Mrs. Webb's garden, just like Mrs. Gibbs, only it's got a lot of sunflowers too. Right here, it's a big butternut tree. Nice town, you know what I mean? Nobody very remarkable ever come out of it, as far as we know. The earliest tombstones in the cemetery up there say 1670 to 1680. Well, as I said, it's about dawn. Shorty Hawkins is getting ready to flag the 545 for Boston. Yep. So another day's begun. There's Doc Gibbs coming down Main Street now, coming back from a baby case. And there's his wife coming downstairs to make breakfast. Doc Gibbs died in 1930. The new hospital's named after him. Mrs. Gibbs died first, long time ago in fact. She went up to visit her daughter, Rebecca, who married an insurance man in Canton, Ohio, and she died there. Pneumonia, but they brought her body back and she's in the cemetery up there now. In our town, we like to know the facts about everybody. There's Mrs. Webb coming downstairs to make her breakfast too. That's Doc Gibbs. He got that call at 1:30 this morning. And there's Joe Crowell, delivering Mr. Webb's Sentinel.
Morning, Doc Gibbs.
Morning, Joe.
Somebody been sick, Doc?
No, just a pair of twins born over in Polish Town.
Would you like your paper now?
Yes, I'll take it. Say, anything serious going on in the world since Wednesday?
Yes, sir. My school teacher, Miss Foster, is getting married to a fella over in Concord.
I declare. How do you boys feel about that?
Well, of course, it's none of my business. But I think if a person starts out to be a teacher, she ought to stay one.
How's your knee, Joe?
Fine, Doc. I never think about it at all. Only like you said, it always tells me when it's going to rain.
Well, what's it telling you today? Going to rain?
No, sir.
Sure?
Yes, sir.
Me ever make a mistake?
No, sir.
Want to tell you something about that boy Joe Crowell there. Joe was awful bright. Graduated from high school here, head of his class. So he got a scholarship to Massachusetts Tech and graduated head of his class there too. It was all wrote up in the Boston paper at the time. Going to be a great engineer, Joe was. But then the war broke out, and he died in France. All that education for nothing.
Get up, Bessie. What's the matter with you today?
Here comes Howie Newsom, delivering the milk.
Morning, Doc. Morning, Howie. Somebody sick? Pair of twins. Twins, eh? Town's getting bigger every year. Going to rain, Howie? No. Fine day. That'll burn through, though. Come on, Bessie. Hello, Bessie. How old is she, Howie? Going on 17. Bessie's all mixed up about the root ever since Lockhart stopped taking a quart of milk every day. She wants to leave him a quart just the same.
Good morning, Howie.
Morning, Mr. Gibbs. Doc's just coming down the street.
Is he? Seems like you're late today.
Yes. Doc? Howie?
Wally, Emily, you'll be late for school. Wally, you wash yourself good or I'll come up there and do it myself.
Ma, what dress should I wear?
Now don't make a noise. Your father's been up all night and needs his sleep. I washed an iron to get him for you special.
Ma, I hate that
I'll
dress.
hush up with you.
Every day I go to school dressed like a sick turkey.
Now, Rebecca, you always look very nice.
Mama, George is throwing soap at me.
I'll come and stop the both of you. That's what I'll do.
We've got a factory in our town, too. Hear it?
Now, children, I won't have it. Breakfast is as good as any other meal, and I won't have you gobbling it down like wolves. It'll stunt your growth. That's a fact. Wally, put away your book.
Oh, Ma, by 10 o'clock I gotta learn all about Canada.
You know the rules as well as I do. No books at the table. As for me, I'd rather have my children healthy than bright.
I'm both, Mama. You know I am. I'm the brightest girl in school for my age. I have a wonderful memory.
Eat your breakfast.
I'm bright, too. When I'm looking at my stamp collection. I'll talk to your father about it when he's rested. Seems to me 25 cents a week's enough for a boy your age.
Oh, Ma, I got a lot of things to buy. I don't see how Rebecca comes to have so much money. She has more than $1.
I've been saving it up gradual.
Well, dear, I think it's a good thing to spend some every now and then.
Mama, do you know what I love most in the world? Do you? Money.
Eat your breakfast.
There's the first bell.
Walk fast, but you don't need to run. Wally, pull up your pants and leave.
Congratulations.
Walk straight, Emily.
Yes, Mom.
Goodbye, Rebecca. Pick up your feet. You look
Bye.
Here, chicken, chicken, chicken. Now go away, you go away. Here, chick, 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 chick. Good morning, Myrtle. How's your cold?
Well, I still get that tickling feeling. Didn't know I'd go to choir practice tonight. Wouldn't be any use.
Have you tried singing over your voice?
Yes, but I couldn't do that and stay on key. While I'm resting myself, I thought I'd string up these beans.
Here, let me help you. Beans have been good this year.
I've decided to put up 40 quarts if it kills me. The children say they hate them, but I've noticed they can eat them down all winter.
Now, Myrtle, I gotta tell you something. Because if I don't tell somebody, I'll burst.
Why, Julia Gibbs.
Here, give me some more of those beans. Myrtle, did one of those second-hand furniture men from Boston come to see you last Friday?
No.
Well, he called on me. First, I thought it was a patient when he see Dr. Gibbs. He wormed his way into my parlor, and Myrtle Webb, he offered me $350 for Grandmother Wentworth's highboy as I'm sitting here.
Why, Julia Gibbs.
He did that whole thing. Why, it was so big, I didn't know where to put it, and almost give it to Cousin Hester Wilcox.
Well, you're going to take the money, aren't you?
I don't know.
You don't know. $350. What's come over you?
Well, if I can get the doctor to take me someplace on a real trip, I'd say it like that. You know, Myrtle, it's been the dream of my life to see Paris, France. Oh, I don't know, it sounds crazy, I suppose. But for years I've been promising myself that if we
What
ever...
did the doctor say?
Well, I did beat the bush a little and said that if I got a legacy, that's the way I put it, I make him take me somewhere.
What did he say?
Oh, you know how he is. I haven't heard a serious word out of him since I known him. He said to make him disconnected with Grover's Corners to go tramping around Europe. Every 2 years, he makes a trip to the battlefields of the Civil War, and that's enough to treat for anybody, he says.
Well, Mr. Webb just admires the way Dr. Gibbs knows everything about the Civil War. Mr. Webb's a good mind to give up Napoleon and move over to the Civil.
It's a fact. Doc Gibbs is never so happy when he's at Antietam or Gettysburg. The times I walked over those hills, Myrtle.
Well, if that second-hand man really serious about buying it, Julia, you sell it. And then you'll get to see Paris all right. Just keep dropping hints from time to time. That's how I got to see the Atlantic Ocean, you know.
Oh, I'm sorry I mentioned it. Only it seems to me that once in your life before you die, you ought to go to a country where they don't talk English and don't even want to.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you very much. Now we're going to skip a few hours. But first, we want a little more information about the town. Kind of a scientific account, you might say. So I've asked Professor Willard of our state university to sketch in a few details of our past history here. Is Professor Willard here? May I introduce Professor Willard? A few brief notes, thank you, Professor. Unfortunately, our time is limited.
Grover's Corners lies on the old Pleistocene granite of the Appalachian Range. It is some of the oldest land in the world. We are very proud of that. A shelf of Devonian basalt crosses it with vestiges of Mesozoic shale and some sandstone outcroppings. But that's all more recent, 200, 300 million years old. Some highly interesting fossils have been found, unique fossils, 2 miles out of town in Silas Peckham's cow pasture. They can be seen at our museum, in our university, at any time. Well, that is at any reasonable time. Shall I read some notes on the meteorological situation?
Afraid we won't have time for that, Professor. Maybe a few brief notes on the history of man here?
Yes. Anthropological data, early Amerindian stock, Cotahatchee tribes. No evidence before the 10th century of this era. Now entirely disappeared. Possible traces in 3 families. Migration toward the end of the 17th century of the English brachiocephalic blue-eyed stock, for the most part.
And the population, Professor Willard?
Within the town limits, 2,640.
Just a moment, Professor.
Oh, yes, indeed. The population, at the moment, is 2,642. Mortality and birth rates constant.
Thank you, Professor. We're all very much obliged to you, I'm sure.
Not at all, not at all.
This way, Professor, and thank you again. Now, the political and social reports. Mr. Webb. Oh, Mr. Webb?
He'll be here in a minute. He just cut his hand while eating an apple.
Thank you, Mrs. Webb. Mr.
Charles,
Webb.
everybody's waiting.
Mr. Webb is editor and publisher of our Grover's Corner Sentinel. That's our local paper, you know.
Well, we're run here by a board of selectmen. All male votes at the age of 21. Women vote indirect. We're lower middle class, sprinkling of professional men. 10% illiterate laborers. Politically, we're 86% Republican, 6% Democrats, 4% Socialist, rest indifferent. Religiously, we're 85% Protestants, 12% Catholics, rest indifferent.
Have you any comments, Mr. Webb?
Very ordinary town if you ask me. Little better behaved than most, probably a lot duller. But our young people seem to like it well enough. 90% of them graduating from high school, settled down right here to live, even when they've been away to college.
Now, is there anyone in the audience who would like to ask Mr. Webb anything about the town? Yes, ma'am.
Is there much drinking in Grover's Corner?
Well, ma'am, I wouldn't know what you call much. Saturday nights the farmhands meet down at Ellery Green Stable and holler some. We've got 1 or 2 town drunks, but they're having remorses every time an evangelist comes to town. No, ma'am, I'd say liquor ain't a regular thing in the home here, except in the medicine chest.
Is there no one in this
Come
town?
forward, will you? Where we can all hear you. What were you saying?
Is there no one in this town aware of the social injustice and industrial inequality?
Oh, yes, everybody is. Something terrible. Seems like they're always talking about who's rich and who's poor.
Then why don't they do something about it?
Well, I don't know, but I guess we're all hunting like everybody else to find a way the diligent and sensible can rise to the top. Meanwhile, we do all we can to help those who can't help themselves. Are there any other questions?
Mr. Webb? Mr. Webb, is there any culture or love of beauty in Grover's Corners?
Well, there ain't much. Not in the sense you mean. We've got some girls that play the piano, and we like the sun coming up over the mountains in the morning, and we notice a great deal about the birds. We pay a lot of attention to them. And we watch the change of the seasons, but other than that, those other things, there ain't much. Robinson Crusoe, the Bible, we all know that. And Whistler's Mother, that's about as far as we go.
So I thought. Thank you, Mr. Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Now we're going to go back into the town. It's early afternoon. All 2,642 have had their dinners and the dishes have been washed. There's an early afternoon calm in our town. Only a few buggies on Main Street, horses dozing at the hitching post. Doc Gibbs is in his office, and Mr. Webb's over there pushing his lawnmower. 1 man in 10 thinks it's a privilege to push his own mower. Yep, there are the children coming down Main Street now.
Emily, walk simply.
Oh,
Who
Papa.
do you think you are today?
Oh, Papa, you're terrible. 1 minute you tell me to stand up straight, and the next you're calling me names. I just don't listen to you.
Golly, I've never gotten a kiss from such a great lady before.
You made a fine speech in class.
Well, I was really ready to make a speech about the Monroe Doctrine, but Miss Corcoran made me talk about the Louisiana Purchase instead. I worked an awful long time on it.
Gee, it's funny, Emily. From my window up there, I can just see your head nights when you're doing your homework over in your room.
Why, can you?
You certainly do stick to it, Emily. I don't see how you can sit still that long. I guess you like school.
Well, I always feel it's something you have to go through.
Yeah.
I don't mind it really. It passes the time.
Yeah. Emily, what do you think? We might work out a kind of telegraph from your window to mine. And every once in a while, you could give me a kind of hint or two on one of those algebra problems. I don't mean the answers. Of course not, Emily. Just some little hint.
Oh, I think hints are allowed. So if you get stuck, George, you whistle to me, and I'll give you some hints.
Emily, you're just naturally bright, I guess.
I always figure it's just the way a person's born.
Yeah, but you see, I want to be a farmer. And my Uncle Luke says whenever I'm ready, I can come over and work on his farm, and if I'm any good, I can just gradually have it.
You mean the house and everything?
Yeah, well, I better be getting out to the baseball field. Good afternoon, Mrs. Webb.
Good afternoon, George.
So long, Emily.
Go on, George.
Emily, help me string up these beans for winter. Why, George Gibbs let himself have a real conversation, didn't he? He's growing up. Say, how old do you think he is?
I don't know. Mama, I made a speech in class today, and I was very good.
You must recite it to your father. At supper. What was it about?
The Louisiana Purchase. It was like silk off a spool. I'm going to make speeches all my life. Mama, are these big enough?
Try get them a little bit bigger if you can.
Mama, will you answer me a question serious?
Seriously, dear, not serious.
Seriously. Will you?
Of course I will.
Mama, am I good looking?
Of course you are. All my children have good features. I'd be ashamed if they didn't.
Oh, Mama, that's not what I mean. What I mean is, am I pretty?
I've already told you, yes.
Mama, you're no help at all. You never tell us the truth about anything.
I am telling you the truth.
Mama, were you pretty?
Why, yes, I was. I was the prettiest girl in town next to Mamie Cartwright.
But Mama, you have to say something about me. Am I pretty enough to get anybody? To get people interested in me?
Oh, Emily, you make me tired. You have a nice, young, pretty face for all normal purposes. Now come along now and bring those beans with you.
Oh, Mama, you're no help at all.
Thank you, thank you. That'll do. Thank you, Mrs. Webb. Thank you, Emily. Now I'll have to interrupt again here. There's some more information we want to know about the town. I think this is a good time to tell you that we've just begun building a bank in Grover's Corners. They're putting in a cornerstone for people to dig up 1,000 years from now. We're putting in a Bible and the Constitution of the United States and a copy of William Shakespeare's plays. What do you say, folks? What do you think? You know, Babylon once had 2 million people in it, and all we know about them are the names of some kings and some copies of wheat contracts and contracts for the sale of slaves. Yet, every night, all those families sat down for supper, and the father came home from his work, and the smoke went up the chimney, same as here. So, I'm going to have a copy of this play put in the cornerstone, so people 1,000 years from now will know a few simple facts about us. So, people 1,000 years from now, this is the way we were in the provinces north of New York in the beginning of the 20th century. This is the way we were in our growing up, and in our marrying, and in our living, and in our dying. Well, good deal of time's gone by. You can hear choir practice going on in the Congregational Church. Children are at home doing their schoolwork. The day's going down like a tired clock.
Emily.
Hello.
Hello.
I can't work at all. The moonlight's so wonderful.
Emily, did you get the third problem?
Why, yes, George. That's the easiest of them all.
I don't see it, Emily. Can you give me a hint?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. The answer's in yards.
In yards? How do you mean?
In square yards.
Oh, in square yards. I see. Thanks a lot, Emily.
You're welcome. My, isn't the moonlight wonderful? And choir practice going on? I think if you hold your breath, you can hear the train. Hear it?
What do you know?
Well, I guess I better go back and try to work.
Good night, Emily, and thanks.
Good night, George.
Oh, George, can you come down a minute?
Yes, Pa.
Make yourself comfortable, George. I'll only keep you a minute. How old are you, George?
I'm 16, almost 17.
And what do you want to do after school's over?
Why, you know, Pa, I want to be a farmer.
You'll be willing to get up early and feed and milk the stock and hoe and hay all day, won't you?
Sure I will. What do you mean, Pa?
Well, George, while I was in my office today, I heard a strange sound. And you know what that was? It was your mother in the backyard chopping wood. There you see your mother, cooking and ironing all day long. And she still has to go in the backyard and chop wood? And you eat her meals, and you put on the clothes she keeps nice for you, and you run off and play baseball, and you treat her like she's some hired maid that we don't like very much. I wonder where your mother could be. Choir practice has never been this late before.
It's only 8:30, Pa.
I don't know why she's in that old choir. She hasn't any more voice than an old crow. Just about time you retire, don't you think?
Yes, Pop.
Good night, Martha. Good night, Mr. Foster.
My place.
Good night, Irma.
Real nice choir practice, wasn't it? Myrtle Webb, would you look at that moon, will you?
Naturally, I didn't want to say a word about it in front of those others. But now that we're alone, really, it's the worst scandal that ever was in this town.
What?
Simon Stimson.
Now, Luella.
But Julia, to have the organist of a church drink and drunk year after year. You know, he was drunk tonight.
Now, Luella, we all know about Mr. Stimson. And we all know about the troubles he's been through. And Dr. Ferguson knows too. And if Dr. Ferguson keeps him on there in the job, the only thing the rest of us can do is just not to notice it.
Not to notice it? But it's getting worse.
No, it isn't, Luella. It's getting better. I've been in this choir practice twice as long as you have, and it doesn't happen near so often. My, I'd hate to go to bed on a night like this. Good night, Luella.
Good night.
Can you get home safe, Luella?
It's as bright as day. I can see Mr. Soames scowling at the window. You'd think we'd been to a dance. Good night.
Well, we had a real nice time.
You're late enough,
Why, Frank, it ain't any later than usual.
and you're stopping at the corner to gossip with a lot of hens.
Now, Frank, don't be grouchy. Come out and smell the heliotrope in the moonlight. See, isn't that wonderful? What did you do all the time I was away?
Oh, I read, as usual. What were the girls gossiping about tonight?
Well, Frank, there is something to gossip about.
Simon Stimson far gone, was he?
Worst I've ever seen him.
Some people just ain't made for small town life. There ain't nothing we can do about it but just leave it alone.
Frank, I'm worried about you.
What are you worried about?
Frank, I think it's my duty to make you get a real rest and change. And if I get that legacy, well, I'm going to insist on it.
Now, Julia, there's no sense in going over that again.
Frank, you are just unreasonable.
Come on, Julia. It's getting late. Before long, you'll catch cold. I gave George a piece of my mind tonight. I reckon you'll have your wood shop for a while now.
Get out, Rebecca. There's only room for one at this window. You're always spoiling everything.
Well, let me look just a minute.
Use your own window.
I did, but there's no moon there. George, do you know what I think? Do you? I think the moon's getting nearer and nearer, and soon there will be a big explosion.
Rebecca, you don't know anything. If the moon were getting near, then it'd be in all the newspapers.
George, is the moon shining on South America, Canada, and half the whole world?
Well, probably is.
9:30. Most of the lights are out. No, there's Constable Warren and Editor Webb.
Good evening, Bill. Evening, Mr. Webb. Quite a moon. Yep. All quiet tonight. Simon Stimson's rolling around a little bit, but I look the other way. Well, he's seen a peck of trouble, one thing after another. Oh, Bill, if you see my boy smoking cigarettes, just give him a word, will you? I don't think your boy's been smoking no cigarettes, Mr. Webb. Well, I hope not. Good night, Bill. Good night. Who's that up there?
It's me, Papa.
Why aren't you in bed?
Oh, I don't know. The moonlight's so wonderful.
Haven't got any troubles on your mind, have you, Emily?
Troubles, Papa? No.
Well, enjoy yourself, but don't let your mother catch you. Good night, Emily.
Good night, Papa.
never told you about that letter Jane Crowfoot got from her minister when she was sick. He wrote Jane a letter, and on the envelope, the address was like this. It said, Jane Crowfoot, Crowfoot Farms, Rover's Corners, Sutton County, New Hampshire, the United States of America.
What's funny about that?
But listen, it's not finished. The United States of America, continent of North America, the Western Hemisphere, the Earth, the solar system, the universe, the mind of God. That's what it said on the envelope.
What do you know?
And the postman brought it just the same.
What do you know?
3 years have gone by, friends. Yes, the sun's come up over 1,000 times. Summers and winters have cracked the mountains a little bit more, and the rain has brought down some of the dirt. Babies who weren't even born yet have begun talking regular sentences already. People who thought they were young and spry can't even bound up a flight of stairs like they used to. All that can happen in 1,000 days. Almost everybody in the world gets married. In our town, there aren't hardly any exceptions. Almost everybody climbs into their graves married. Yes, 3 years have gone by. It's 1904. It's July 7th, just after high school commencement. That's about the time most of our young ones jump up and start getting married. As soon as they've passed their last examinations, suddenly they feel themselves fit to be married. It's early morning. You can hear the 5:45 from Boston. Yes. There's Mrs. Webb and Mrs. Gibbs come down to make breakfast just as though it were an ordinary day. Now, I don't have to point out to the women in my audience that these two ladies cooked and cleaned their houses, and they cooked 3 meals a day and no summer vacations. They cooked, cleaned, and they washed and cleaned the house, and they never, ever had a nervous breakdown.
Yeah, Bessie.
Here comes Howie Newsom, delivering the milk. And there's Cy Crowell, delivering the papers like his brother before him.
Morning, Si.
Morning, Howie!
Anything in the papers I ought to know? Morning, Mrs. Webb.
Morning, Mr. Newsom. I promised you 4 quarts of milk, but I hope you can spare me another.
Yes'm. And 2 of cream?
Will it start raining again, Mr. Newsom?
Well, just saying to Mrs. Gibbs is how I may lighten up. And Mrs. Newsom told me to tell you how we both hope to be very happy together, Mrs. Webb.
Thank you, and thank Mrs. Newsom. And we expect to see you at the wedding.
Yes, Mrs. Webb. Hope to get there. Couldn't miss that. Come on, Bessie.
Well, Ma, today is the day. You're losing one of your chicks.
Frank Gibbs, don't you say another word. I feel like crying every other minute. Here, sit down and drink your coffee.
The groom's up shaving himself. Only there ain't a whole lot to shave. Whistling and singing. And every now and then he says, I do, to the mirror.
I declare, Frank, I don't know how he'll get along. I arranged his things on his bed and seen to it he put warm things on. Frank, they're too young.
I was remembering my wedding morning, Julia.
Now, Frank Gibbs, don't you start that.
I was the scaredest fella in the state of New Hampshire. I thought for sure I'd make a mistake. And when I saw you coming down that aisle, I thought you were the prettiest girl I'd ever seen. The only problem was that I'd never seen you before. There I was, marrying a total stranger.
And how do you think I felt? Weddings are perfectly awful things.
I get shocked every time I think of George setting out to be a family man. That great gangling thing, I tell you, there's nothing so terrifying in the world as a relationship between father and son. It's the most darnest, most awkwardest.
Well, mother and daughter ain't no picnic, let me tell you. People are meant to live life by 2 by 2. Tain't naturally be lonesome. Did you hear Rebecca's doing around upstairs?
No.
Lord sakes, this has got to stop. Rebecca! Rebecca, come down and get your breakfast.
Good morning, everybody. Only 5 more hours left to live.
George, kid, where do you think you're going?
Just stepping across the grass to see my girl.
Now, George, you put on your overshoes.
Oh, Mom, it's just a step.
George, you'll catch a deathly cold and cough all throughout the service.
George, do as your mother tells you.
From tomorrow on, you can kill yourself in all weathers, but while you're in my house, you'll live wisely.
Be back in a minute. Good morning, Mother Webb.
Goodness, you frightened me. Now, George, you can come in a minute out of the wet, but you know I can't invite you in.
Why not?
You know as well as I do the groom can't see his bride on his wedding day, not until he sees her in church.
Aw, that's just a superstition. Good morning, Mr. Webb.
Good morning, George.
How's Emily?
She hasn't waked up yet. I haven't heard a sound out of her.
Emily's asleep?
We've been up all hours packing and sewing. Now you sit here and have some coffee, and I'll go get Emily.
Well, George, how are you?
Oh, fine. I'm fine. I wish a fellow could get married without all that marching up and down.
Well, George, every man that has ever lived has felt that way about it. It just hasn't been any use. It's the women folk who build up weddings, my boy. A man looks pretty small at a wedding, George. Don't misunderstand me, my boy. Marriage is a wonderful thing. Wonderful thing. And don't you forget that. I was thinking the other night about some advice my father gave me when I got married. Charles, he said, Charles, start out early. Show him who's boss. And he said, if anything ever irritates you about your wife, just get up and leave the house. And he said, never, never let your wife know how much money you have. Never.
Mr. Webb, I don't think I could do
So I took the opposite of my father's advice, and I've been happy ever since.
George, Emily's got to come downstairs and eat her breakfast. She sent you her love, but she don't want to lay eyes on you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you all. Now I'll have to interrupt again here. That's the end of the act, friends. You can go and eat now, those of you that want to eat.